Honorable Chief Justice Sahab, Honorable Judges of the Superior Courts, Honorable Judges of the Subordinate Courts, distinguished delegates, members of the fraternity, ladies and gentlemen. My paper is slightly different as it involves the earlier session of today's half, which was human rights and terrorism, and is coupled also with the fact of me including the role of courts. My paper is available also at the desk, but I will summarize because time is of, as suggested by Mr. Heather, that I should be concise and perhaps restrict myself. So I will summarize what has been stated in my paper. Terrorism basically is an act of inflicting harm on what is called non-combatants. We all in this room are unarmed and can come within the definition of non-combatants. Now, what is terrorism to one perhaps may not be terrorism for those who inflict it. I'll just briefly read the definition. Terrorism has been defined as a criminal act designed to provoke a state of terror in the general public which comprises of non-combatants. The intent to terrorize is justifiable, whatever the consideration, be it political, ideological, racial, ethnic, or religious. Terrorism is a pejorative term which has negative connotations that is employed against one's opponent. Hence, to call someone or an organization as terrorist becomes unavoidably subjective, depending largely as to the size and number of sympathizers who welcome the act of terror as it serves what is a common cause. The global terrorism, in my humble submission, since I majored in the Arab-Israeli conflict while in college, arises from the dispute which remains unresolved in the Middle East. After the Second World War, the State of Israel was created in 1948. United Nations Charter and the resolution which was passed clearly stated Israel to be created on Palestinian land. Now they carved out a nation, a very small nation, in 1947, so that the Jews of the world would then migrate and settle and create their own homeland. The problem was they landed on land which was already that of the Palestinians. The Palestinians did not have a nation or a state to be represented. The conflict went on. The Palestinians used means which the West calls terrorism because all they had was stones in their hand. And they fought for their liberty, and they fight for their liberty till today. The war of 1967 made matters worse. There was a six-day war which eventually led to the occupation of the West Bank. The West Bank is primarily comprised of Palestinians, be it Christians, but mostly Muslims. This enraged the Palestinian community more and more till the organization which was then the PLO, which was termed as a terrorist organization, did acts which again the West and the United Nations termed terrorism. Finally, the terrorism continued from both sides of the border. It is not forgettable when in 1982, the Shabra Shatila camp incident took place, when under the leadership and command of Ariel Sharon, the then commander of the Israeli forces, invaded the refugee camps and killed at least 3,000 to 5,000 innocent civilian women and children. At best, this was condemned by the UN, but the act was not treated as an act of terrorism. So can there be a definition which is different for those who fight for a freedom struggle and the struggle or the fight which is being fought through military power, through a state? Is there not an act of state terrorism involved here? If we see the invasion of Iraq that took place a few years ago, the West was again of the opinion that there are WMDs in Iraq. The basis of the war was weapons of mass destruction were then with the present regime. And it was later on after the war, the attack took place, and few months on, or years on, after diligent search, there were no weapons to be found. Now the people in the US perhaps will be different, but in the United Kingdom there was severe protest. They realized that this was a war based on a lie that led again to the removal of a regime that was not acceptable to the then government of the United States. The people in the United Kingdom protested severely enough that eventually led for the then Prime Minister Tony Blair to issue a disclaimer and a clarification on his role. We have the recent experience of the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring started in Egypt when the civilians amassed at Tahrir Square and raised opposition to the continuing government of Hosni Mubarak. Today's King of Saudi Arabia issued a statement that this is nothing but an act of terrorism initiated by a bunch of terrorists, and branded all those Egyptians who were speaking for their fundamental rights as terrorists. It just so happened that movement prevailed and succeeded, and we saw a change of regime. This was after the change which was encouraged by the change in Tunisia. Later on, we have what we call the crisis in Syria. Syrian government is a state and working under definite rules of law. But the opposition uprising in Syria, we've noticed today, has resulted in the death of hundreds and hundreds of Syrians. Now, countries around it realizing that this movement is gaining strength, they have distanced themselves from the Syrian government. They're calling for the removal of the Syrian government. They are not recognizing the writ of the state, and the question is where we need to decide where does the balance lie. And this is when people see that majority people are taking a certain stand, then they go with that majority.